In a universe of furious fighters and unbelievable legends, he envisioned a savage Norse champion, a fearsome pillager, a cruel adversary, a brew enlarging agnostic who snickered despite death. And the odds are you're pondering Ragnar Lothbrok. He was a definitive bad dream of Britain and France, father to the incomparable barbarian armed force, and a darling to no less than three remarkable ladies. Ragnar's undertakings read like they've been culled from a Hollywood blockbuster. Professing to be a relative of the Viking god Odin himself, he battled Goliath snakes, drove armed forces into fight, vanquished tremendous raps of Scandinavia, and threatened the clueless individuals of the English Isles. Ragnar Lothbrok was the child of Sigurd Ring, a Danish and Swedish lord. Referenced in numerous old Scandinavian adventures, Ragnar's careful date of birth is obscure, yet he is accepted to have been brought into the world around the start of the 9th century. His story starts when he ventured out to Norway to vindicate the passing of his granddad in a conflict against one self-broadcasted Lord Fro. This was the kind of thing normal in the Vikings period, a period brimming with war, treachery, and vengeance. Legend says Lord Fro was loathed by ladies who all rushed to Ragnar's camp, and among them was a safeguard lady called Lagertha. She battled close by Ragnar in the fight, and was depicted to have the savagery and boldness of a man toward the finish of fight. When Ragnar and his men stood successful, he pronounced that he had won the fight due to the cut of Lagertha. Each man in Ragnar's military needed to wed Lagertha. Thus did Ragnar. At first, she wasn't intrigued, and to try not to be moved toward by undesirable admirers, she had a bear and a dog set external her camp to monitor her. Anyway, Ragnar was a man who generally sought after his objectives, and once he killed the hold-on for a lance and stifled the dog to death to substantiate himself deserving of Lagertha. The Vikings were just dazzled with dauntlessness and May, and that was enough for him to prevail upon Lagertha, who consented to wed Ragnar. The two of them were popular for assaulting and ravaging waterfront towns of Britain and encompassing regions together. Every spring, when the sea waves were reasonable for cruising, Ragnar and his powers cruised to unfamiliar shores and went after religious communities and chapels, taking all the wealth they held. Ragnar was not only a common privateer like different Vikings that preceded him, yet he was an ocean lord, a seaborne ruler, strong enough by his own doing to send off independent assaults and hold on to lands for himself. He constrained unfamiliar rulers to concede him ripe cultivating land in return for a commitment that he wouldn't assault them in the future. Consequently, he was the main Viking ruler to fabricate settlements on unfamiliar shores. Soon enough, however, Ragnar would separate from Lagertha as he needed to wed Thora, little girl of Baron Harrower of Gotaland. Icelandic Adventures of Vikings uncover Thora had kept a little lindworm that developed into a huge snake. Duke Harrower declared whoever could kill the monster snake of Thora would win her hand in marriage. These crazy difficulties were a piece of Viking society and way of life. Ragnar acknowledged the demand and wore brakes that he had treated with tar and sand to shield his legs from the snake's toxin. Using a lance, Ragnar moved toward the snake, who spat poison at him, yet the toxin couldn't infiltrate. Ragnar's brakes, he stuck his lance through the snake and cut off its head. It was because of this occurrence that Ragnar procured his name Lothbrok, meaning shaggy breeches. The two of them got hitched as Ragnar proceeded with his assaults on unfamiliar shores, collecting riches and distinction. Ragnar consumed the greater part of his time on Earth either assaulting or pulverizing uprisings that were started when he went to new grounds. Dealers were continuously trusting that their time will strike when a pioneer had disappeared. This was the Viking lifestyle. Ragnar confronted a nationwide conflict in Denmark and requested help from his ex Lagertha, who had secured herself as a well-known champion and dupe by her own doing. Despite the fact that they were separated from Lagertha, came to the guide of Ragnar with almost 100 boats loaded up with talented champions. She surrounded Ragnar's foe and gone after them from behind. This was the second time Lagertha had added to Ragnar's triumph. Soon subsequently, Ragnar's better half Thor kicked the bucket, after which he fell in gloom. He was continually pained and gave indications of misery to acquire solace. He bowed his brain to additional conflicts, and Strike's legend says he turned into a warhawk. He proclaimed that each Viking father dedicate his laziest and most fragile child to his administration. He needed to show the world that even the most fragile Viking man was superior to the most grounded fighters of different countries. Ragnar had his eyes set on Britain again. He believed that the divine beings should remember him as he spread blood for them. He killed Lord Haim of Northumbria in fight and struck various pieces of his realm. Subsequently, his child ruler Aella became dead, set on retribution from Ragnar for killing his dad, and enthusiastically sat tight for a potential chance to get his hands on Ragnar. During one of Ragnar's different experiences, his men saw a lady washing adjacent to a cascade. Charmed by her magnificence, they permitted the bread they were heating up to copy. When Ragnar asked about this disaster, they enlightened him concerning the young lady. They expressed the young lady's name was Aslaug, and she professed to be the mysterious little girl of Sigurd, an eminent legend. Ragnar then, that point, sent for her yet to test her brains. He directed her to show up neither dressed nor stripped, neither hungry nor full, and neither alone nor in organization. Slag showed up wearing a fishing net, gnawing an onion, and with just a canine as a buddy. Intrigued by her resourcefulness and finding her a savvy friend, Ragnar accepted her as his better half. It was with her that Ragnar had most of his children, including Bjorn Ironside, and ever the boneless. Ragnar's next fixation was the city called Paris. He broke the pledge endorsed with Charles the Bear of France and cruised up the sand stream, blockading Paris in Walk 845. His armada comprised of 120 Viking ships, as he instructed in excess of 500 men. Charles, who was resolved not to let the imperial convent of Holy Person Denis, close to Paris, be obliterated, gathered a military, which he partitioned into two sections, one for each side of the waterway. The Vikings went after and crushed one of the divisions of the more modest Frankish armed force, taking 111 of their men as detainees. The French armed force on the opposite side of the stream watched with sickening dread as the Vikings forfeited the French detainees to Odin. This was finished to respect the Norse god Odin, as well as to prompt dread in the leftover Frankish powers. The Vikings showed up in Paris on Easter Sunday, the 29th of spring, entering the city and looting it anyway. During the attack, a plague broke out in their camp. The Vikings were part of the way agnostic and part of the way Christian at this point, so likewise they petitioned the Old Norse divine beings and saved a quick to support the Christian one. The request to one of the divine beings appeared to have filled in as the plague died down. Then again, the Franks couldn't gather a compelling protection and needed to pay an enormous amount of payoff to Ragnar, which contained 7,000 French pounds. This was the last significant fight that Ragnar battled, as he became old. In the meantime, his children, Bjorn Ironside and Uber, would grow up to become prestigious fighters. Ragnar, wishing not to be outperformed, set out to overcome Britain with simply 2 ships anyway. He got found out in a wild tempest during his journey, with most of his champions suffocated in the most unfathomable ocean. He actually figured out how to find his direction to Britain, yet truly represented no test. He was eventually crushed by Lord Aella's predominant powers. Lord Aella at last had his retribution on Ragnar Lothbrok for killing his dad. Even while confronting demise, he was valiant and giggled at the essence of it. He cautioned Lord Aella that his children would come and retaliate for him. The Adventures report his renowned discourse prior to being executed. It encourages me to realize that Odin plans for a banquet soon. I will drink lager from bended horns. This legend that comes in Valhalla doesn't regret his demise. I will not enter Odin's corridor with dread. There I will trust that my children will go along with me. And when they do, I will relax in their stories of when the simpler will invite me. My demise comes without conciliatory sentiment, and I invite the Valkyries to gather me home. Ragnar was then tossed into a pit of snakes to bite the dust in distress. That was the finish of the powerful Viking champion Ragnar Lothbrok. His passing would bring about the development of the incomparable pagan armed force drove by his child, Evar the Boneless. That military would attack Britain and get payback for Ragnar's demise. Yet that is a story for some other time. Thank you kindly for watching till the end. Stay tuned for additional recordings and buy into our channel.